here we are, and I couldn't be more thrilled to show this story about young people facing the biggest threat to their generation and future generations, and looking at how they see solutions to this big problem. So check it out and stick around for a Q&A afterward.
Who knew that the future and salvation comes through opera singing in the subways and like young MIT students? This is such a hopeful, incredible film. And I wanted to start by asking you, because it's a very freaking difficult film to make. It's got so much packed into it, and this speaks to both of your work. So many different experts, two young, set of couples that are incredibly eloquent, smart, beautiful, funny. How did you manage to pull all these different strands of things that you wanted to talk about together, crafting the film? Like, where was your starting point when you had the idea of making this film, and how did you craft this complex narrative?
Well, I was really concerned about climate. I mean, I'm worried about future generations, and it seemed like the science was not being taken into account as far as what the policy was, and certainly the advocacy among the environmental community in most cases. And so I felt like this isn't going to work. I trust the scientists, and so I felt like it's important to find a way to tell this story, and just started making it, Derek Wieson, the DP, and I, who
dream team of people,
editing,
and of course, camera people.
Adam came in later, but we just started shooting stuff, and we started driving up to Cambridge and interviewing people, and it really was kind of a journey of discovery. We didn't think we had no plans to go to China. We didn't know if Jim Henson would be in the movie. We didn't know any of that. So it was just sort of starting on this almost a 3-year journey, and kind of ended up there. And then, of course, Adam had to make sense of it all. We gave him quite a task, so I got to give credit where credit is due there.
What did he say, Adam, when he's like, hey, I have like how many hundreds of hours of footage and interviews? Like, many?
At least a couple.
A lot.
What did he say to you? It's like, here's the movie I want to make.
Well, I mean, I don't know a lot about this subject, and I say that proudly. Not because I'm dumb and ignorant, but I actually like embracing projects that I don't know a lot about, because I like to think I'm kind of the barometer of what the regular audience viewer might be, which I think is the goal of films, that people can see it that aren't really up to speed on nuclear energy, nuclear engineering, anything like that. And so I'm interested in telling stories and trying to find out where the humanity is within all this science somewhere, and to try to put that together.
How do you make it flow so well? Because, this could have been like a kind of film, and it's really fun to watch, and it gives you that level of hope in this kind of like crazy situation of despair that we're living in terms of, global warming and the lack of interest in science. And so did you knew it was going to be so relevant today when you started making it?
I sure hoped so. I mean, I devoted a lot of time. I mean, as my wife and kids could, attest, it was a lot of, sort of blood, sweat, and tears, and not really any money, that's for sure. And, but, I mean, I've been working in this business for a while, and the thing that I realized is that you've got to you've got to respect the audience, and you have to respect their attention span and their, engagement and level of interest, I think, and or else all is lost, really. So it was really important to me to just keep that at the forefront. And, and the people that we were talking to, for the most part, got that. The people in the movie sort of got it, and they weren't trying to teach a graduate level course when we were doing interviews and stuff. And then again, Adam sort of had some way to weave this thing together in a nice, artistic way that would have been really difficult for me, just because I was so, and any filmmaker is going to be so in it that it's just impossible to do anything. So it worked really well.
I finally understood fusion. Do you have any questions for them, or we keep talking? Questions? Yep, there you go, all the way back.
Yeah, I hear you fine. The question was just about what's our distribution strategy, and we're looking for distribution. We're totally independent right now, but we would like to pursue domestic and international broadcast over the top, as well as a serious impact campaign. Going to particularly universities across the country and hopefully abroad as well. And of course, that all costs money and takes a lot of buy-in from various people. But that's kind of the thing. It is hopefully going to be something that can reach a wide audience on the usual channels of distribution. But hopefully, we really want young people to see this, and we also want policymakers to see this film. And it maybe doesn't answer all the questions, but it's at least a good point of departure for a conversation like we're having now. So, and then the second question, I don't really remember. Oh, the money. Yeah, I mean, we had actually the chief of staff of the Department of Energy's Office of Nuclear Energy came to our world premiere at the Heartland Film Festival 3 weeks ago. And I told her, I said, look, you're putting the US government puts $40 billion a year into the pharmaceutical research, which is great, and I don't begrudge that at all, but that's a multi-billion-dollar industry. You're talking about a potentially trillion-dollar industry that could save the planet, and you're putting less than $1 billion into that in basic research. So we need some real support, and of course, they're not really too interested in spending any more money on anything, but they talked about it, so they're, so.
I was thinking when I was watching the film, why is it like somebody like Bill Gates not investing in some of these smaller companies? Like, why is it like Mark and Leslie not supported by Bill Gates and he's doing his own research? Like, given that it looks like really sounding, or other couple, Adam and, no, sorry, Jacob and Caroline, sorry, yes. Jacob and Caroline, why are they not talking to each other and like...
Oh, they're talking to them.
Yeah?
Oh, yeah.
And
yeah,
investing in them?
Well, no, but there's other people investing, and and I think that Bill Gates has made what's TerraPower is doing. I mean, they just signed a JV joint venture agreement with the Chinese nuclear utility in September, like 2 months ago, and they're hiring 300 more people to start work on building this reactor that they're doing. So he's making it happen. He's, I think he's done a lot. And I think now rich people like other rich people to come, they don't want to fund the whole thing by themselves. They want to sort of get something started and then bring in other people. I think that's what he's trying to do, but I don't have any other thoughts on that, really.
Because it seems, especially with a smaller scale reactor, it seems something that is fairly doable. I was thinking, like Puerto Rico, or right here, right now, like and like a very short amount of money, like $2 billion, is not that much for.
It's not. No, theirs is really cheap. It's not. It's in the tens. I mean, it's only a 5 megawatt reactor, but it's in the I think in the tens of millions once they get to. I don't know. I mean, you can't. Yeah. I have no idea. But the point is, all of these are pretty far off right now in terms of we need to get the government to get with the program and to realize that there's a real opportunity here to lead. And if the U.S. doesn't want to lead, then I guess Russia is going to be leading and China is going to be leading. And so if you want to have those countries leading the world in this most important sector, energy, as we face climate change, I think that's a shame and that's a tragedy. So I think the United States has a role to play. We've been given a lot. We have a lot of responsibility.
Do the science? I'm seeing you. Yes. Okay.
China's building one of everything, of every energy technology you could imagine, at least one of everything. And they have a gas-cooled reactor right now that's probably the safest possible reactor. If you're talking about safe, that's the safest possible reactor you can have. It's not the most efficient, maybe, reactor in the world, but it's the safest, and that's going to be coming online I don't know exactly, pretty soon, in the next few months, I would think. But yeah, they're doing molten salt reactors, they're doing sodium-cooled fast reactors, they're doing water reactors still. Like everywhere else in the world, they can build water reactors because they don't have, in certain other places, they don't have these sort of like nuclear watchdogs that are coming after the industry and basically trying to make it safer. Like nobody's ever died in the United States from radiation from a nuclear accident ever. And yet they have to make them safer and safer for some reason. And that's kind of code for making it impossible to build and too expensive. And the only people that benefit from that are the fossil fuel industry, because every time we close a nuclear plant like here, when we close Indian Point, that's going to be replaced by gas plants. And they love it because we pay the highest electrical prices in New York here out of the whole country. So if you have gas that costs whatever it costs, cheap, and you can sell electricity out of a gas plant for the highest possible price, that's a great deal, you know. So that's what New York is doing by closing down Indian Point, is basically putting money in the pockets of the fossil industry.
Question right here.
Yes, I've talked to Robert Stone, director of Pandora's Promise. I was at Gordon McDowell's house in Calgary in the summertime. And I think you're talking about maybe Rod Adams, is it? Yeah, I mean, the guy who founded Friends of the Earth was an oil man. That's who founded Friends of the Earth. So that's, you know, there's pretty much, well, who benefits? That's what you got to ask yourself. Who benefits from our fear, our irrational fear of nuclear? Fossil fuel industry.
Question up here in the front.
That's a good question. And okay. So the question was about waste and what's the waste situation with new technologies. So it depends. Is the question. Transatomic changed their design from one that runs on nuclear waste to one that produces half as much nuclear waste and gets twice as much efficiency as today's reactors. So theirs is less waste. But as far as like a fast reactor, like what sodium-cooled fast reactor, which is what TerraPower or Transatom or Oklo is making, essentially those can burn up pretty well 95% of the what are called actinides, the big like uranium, plutonium-sized atoms. And so what's left is the stuff, the split in half atoms, which are like cesium and I think strontium, I don't know. But anyway, they're half-sized, and they're really radioactive, but only for anywhere from like weeks to decades, or you know, maybe a couple hundred years or something. But they're you know, it's not the millennia-long problem. The millennial, you know, waste that's really radioactive for a long time that we have to worry about is essentially those actinides. And those actinides are, it's another word for the big, you know, potentially fuel atoms. Those can be used as fuel in fast reactors and in, you know, epithermal, whatever. But the point is, I don't want to get too technical, but we now have the technology, the materials, the modeling capability, all of this stuff to do things that just weren't really feasible, you know, as recently as 10 or 15 years ago. And, you know, I think that we've got to really rethink what we're doing, because yes, you can basically burn up 95. You could just run the whole. You don't even have to really necessarily get any more uranium out of the ground if you run all fast reactors. That's not really going to happen, but you know, that's something to think about.
Absolutely. There was a question here in the front.
Okay, good question. Thank you. The question was about what are the markets like for this type of technology, particularly in the United States, Canada, and Europe, and you know, I don't think there's really a big market for, as it is right now. These countries are all decreasing the amount of energy that we consume, if anything. And so there's not really a big market. I mean, we have to decarbonize, and a lot is made of that in these countries. But I think that the thing we have to think about is the developing world, the 1.4 billion people who have no electricity, the 2.5 to 3 billion people that have, you know, don't have a proper cooking fuel. You know, the world's energy consumption is going to double in the next 35 years. And so not only do we have to eliminate our current, you know, fossil fuel consumption, but we have to prevent the next, you know, 100% more of that from being fossil as well. So if you look at the developing world like China, India, eventually Africa, I don't know. I mean, nuclear is kind of a funny thing, because nuclear is not a fuel driven industry. Like if you look at oil, gas, fossil fuels, it's the fuel source that drives those industries. It's multi-trillion dollar that they're ramming this, they're lobbying, they've got a lot of money invested. That's where all the money is in those industries. Whereas nuclear, you've got a tiny, like a few $1 billion a year is the uranium business in the whole world. A few $1 billion a year. So that's less than a day of oil, for example. So there's so much money that's being made in the fossil industry, and their biggest threat is nuclear. And the only type of energy that's ever displaced a fossil plant is nuclear. And so they know that. And so, you just have to follow the money and look at who benefits. And the places that nuclear has been successful are places where the government has gotten involved and said, we want power for the people, because it's not going to be an industry that's going to ram it through for profit, because it's really the power plant and the operating of it that is the thing for nuclear, and the fuel is secondary. So it's just a completely different business model. And I think any country that thinks about energy as something that is a good for the people will see nuclear as something useful and viable.
Unfortunately, we have to wrap it up here, but I'm sure you can ask them some questions in the lobby. Thank you so very much for coming. Thank you so much for this fantastic film.
I want to just let you know, thank you. Eric Meyer started a group called Generation Atomic. If any of you guys want to sign up for the mailing list or get some more information, Noah's in the back. He's got a clipboard and some cards. Thank you all very much.